Hello and welcome to the AVRUM ROSENSWEIG show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hello, folks, and welcome to the show. My name is AVRUM ROSENSWEIG, and I am here with my friend and my colleague, Rabbi Shlomo Gomorrah, for our series, which is called Parsha and Prose. How are you, Rabbi?
Very well, and how are you, AVRUM?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much. And I want to tell our listeners that today we'll be discussing Parshat Emor through the lens of The Stranger by Albert Camus. But before we get into that, the Rabbi and I like to have sort of a tete-a-tete, a back and forth on things having to do with our families, with us, with the Jewish people in Israel. And Rabbi, I have a video that I'd like to show. It's a very short video of the return of Eden Alexander yesterday after being hostage in Gaza for 584 days. This is a video which probably you have seen and many people have seen when he reunites with his parents. So let's take a look.
This is a video that you could put on a loop and to see it again and again and to get very moved every time you see it, no matter
so
what.
Let's watch it, and then I'd like to discuss it. You know, I'm always so moved by the Israeli emotions, if you will. There's no holding back from how that mother feels. And even Eden himself, he was yelling and he seemed so effusive. His life, his face was lit up after going through a life of hell. It's just the life spirit of the Israeli is unbelievable.
It is. And listen, it's a very raw clip because you see the emotions in a very authentic way. Now, I have to tell you, I always like debate with myself this kind of clips. There is something that disturbed me when such a private moment of reuniting son and mother is exposed to the world in the moment which is the most intimate one. At the same time, I can understand like how impactful and how moving it is. But I myself, if I would be in the same situation, I think that I would like to keep it more private. Again, no judgment made, but I think it's something that we always have to think about, like the privacy of our life versus the impact we have on everyone. After all, Idan and every hostage became, in a way, not like a private individuals, but a part of the nation. And maybe the nation is supposed to see a moment like this after so many tefillot and so many tears. So I'm not sure. Again, no judgments made. But on one hand, it's something very moving. At the same time, I said, wow, maybe they had to keep this very moment. You know, maybe 5 minutes later, yes, to bring the camera and everything. But I feel uncomfortable sometimes when I see the publicity of this moment, which is so intimate between mother and son?
No, I understand what you're saying. I guess the follow up to that is that after this clip, apparently they had sat together for 2.5 hours or so by
Sure.
themselves with no cameras. I think that using these clips is truly a way of bringing this entire family together, not only the Eden's family, but us, because it gives us hope. And while I understand your point, I totally get it. Growing up as a rabbi's son, I remember when I lost my father, lahavdil, as they say, when I lost my father, and the outpouring from the community was enormous. And there was an expectation on us as the rabbinical family to help other people grieve. I started to understand then, I was about 29 years old, the public versus the private, and how we respond to that. And here's the situation, which is very clear. It is a very, very intimate moment. There's something a little bit uncomfortable about watching them in that time of reuniting and that incredible outpouring of love. But on the other hand, it's pretty important.
Yeah, again, as I said, I'm Torah and I can see
Yeah.
the two sides of it. It's interesting what you said because it certainly it brings us very close to the parsha that start with the idea of Avelu that you just mentioned, and the Kohen Gadol being a public figure. Is not allowed to express his emotions in public. He's not part of the mourning family, which is unique case because everyone else is supposed to mourn and to have his own feeling, and to the point where Kohanim who are not allowed to defile themselves. When it comes to family, it's different. It's the only exception to the rule, except of the Kohen Gadol, which is completely not a private person. And it's interesting, and it's also interesting that last week there was a election of a new pope, and I think that I told you that the in Latin the pope is magnum papam, Kohen Gadol, basically, and he's completely a person that belongs to the church, not to himself. And again, a moment like this of Idan, is it a private moment? Is it a public moment? I guess that it's a mixture because Idan is not individual anymore. He's representing something much bigger. It's like Am Israel was in the Shevi, in the captivity, and came out. So it's not only him who is released, all of us in a way, something of us was released.
A good example of what you're saying is Aaron, after Nadav and Avihu, his two sons were taken by God, his silence. And some of the Meforshim say that he had to do his work. He had to make sure that he didn't overwhelm the Bnei Yisrael with his mourning. And in fact, they responded to his mourning. But the interesting point about Idan being a public figure, eventually he won't be. Eventually he won't be. That the interesting thing about Israel is that when you're sitting at a cafe and you turn to the person next to you, let's say an older person, and you start to talk to him or her, and they tell you about the incredible things that they did during the 1956 war, the 1967 war, and how high profile they were and how important they were to that victory. And today, there they are quietly sitting, drinking a coffee, right?
It's a very true statement. Sometimes you walk on the street, you don't know that the person like on your right and your left are past heroes, and
Yes.
today they are regular people.
My
Totally.
brother-in-law, who just moved out of Jerusalem to the Shtachim, he loved his shul, and he misses it dearly. His name's Jack Levenstein, and he said that he would go to shul, and there, sitting next to him, would be a fellow who was a world expert on the Second Temple period. Or there on the right hand side was an MK, and he said that's life in Israel. It's a small country.
It's very true. Listen, I do remember on Sukkot last year, I went to shul for Shachrit, and there was a pretty old person who is was learning from the Torah. And I gave him Yashar Koach. It was a very unique one. It was like the Nosach of the German Jews. And the guy looks like 90 something. And I come to him and I give him Shalom Aleichem. And I ask him for his name. And he said, Fustenberg. I said, Fustenberg, are you Professor Fustenberg? He said, how do you know about me? So I told him, I have some background in math, and like, you have to understand, this guy would get the Nobel Prize for math if there would be one. There is no one, and he's more dealing. Hillel Fustenberg is one of, I would say today, the top 5 mathematician in the world. And he's like a simple Jew. You could just walk next to him. I'm sure that even people in his shul don't know that his name is all over the math world. And I'm sure that in this shul, if I would ask every single one, I would find like an amazing story behind every one of them.
And it's also a very compelling thing that people who are in the public eye, they can often have two very different personas, right? And again, I saw this growing up with my father, who was a rabbi in Kitchener, not a huge city, but he was a high profile rabbi, very well known by all the communities. And his persona outwardly was very much of giving, extending himself emotionally outward. And then at home, it was much different. It could be very quiet, and very obviously familial, and just two different personas. And those personas very rarely get mixed. I think a person who is more in the public eye learns how to deal with each one of those. Would you agree with that?
Completely. And I think if you just mention Aaron, I think here you have like exactly that. You have like a public persona, and you have a person who is the father to 4 children, and 2 of them died in one day. And his reaction has to be on the 2 levels. One level as the Kohen Gadol, and one level as the father, which make it impossible, basically.
Yeah, very good point. Now, Rabbi, we like, as I said before, to do Shivim Panim and just to discuss various different issues. Very often when we're doing our podcast, you will say something like, oh, AVRUM, we could do an entire podcast on that. So I write it down quickly, and then I put it in my notes for the next week. One week, the concept of evolution came up. He said, oh, no, AVRUM, we need a whole podcast for that, right? So I wrote it down, and I did a little investigation into it, and I just want to ask you, in short, is there a concept of evolution within Judaism?
You talk about evolution of Darwin, or in general?
In general.
Evolution. Of course, there is a evolution. Like the world evolve all the time, and we hope that one day it's going to be perfect. If you talk about the scientific evolution, I think Judaism does not talk about it because the purpose of Judaism is to tell the intelligent person, the world, what people should do, what is expected of them by God, how they became humans, what are the stages. It's simply not part of what Judaism is supposed to tell us. This belongs to science, and I can accept the scientific theory of Darwin, and it will have nothing to do with my Jewish beliefs.
So I will tell you something that I read. The Torah presents God as the purposeful creator. You find that in Genesis 1:1. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, in The Educational Value of Judaism, argues that God's creation operates through natural laws. Evolution, including mechanisms like natural selection, can be seen as God's method for shaping life, harmonizing the Torah's emphasis on divine purpose with scientific processes.
I think it's a very scientific approach and Jewish approach. He does not want to dismiss highly accepted theories. And when he wrote it, I think that the theory of evolution was not even spread at the time. He lived before Darwin. But the idea of not accepting the description of the Torah on the pshat level, that one day is one day, and this was created before this, was already debated. And what he's doing is something very, very simple. He said, well, the Torah is not interested to teach us geology and the history of creation as much as the fact that God prepared everything for the human being, and that's the way God expects him to behave.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if one day was one day, maybe not. After all, a day is defined by the movement of the sun. The sun was created on the fourth day. So how did they define the first day when sun was not exist? So possibly, maybe the first day was million or billions of years. Who knows? And to be honest with you, who cares? Because we are human beings now, and we have certain responsibilities. So, and it's interesting that we talk about it because indeed, that's exactly the difference between our Parsha of Emor and The Stranger of Albert Camus or Camus, because you can take a completely secular view and to say, you know, God is not involved in all this, it just happened in a way of evolution. And the question of purpose and meaning became a big question. So what does that mean? If there is no God and there is no purpose and there is no divine law, well, this is one that, you have to answer the question. And obviously, the approach of Parshat Emor and the Torah is very, very different. Birth and death have a huge meaning of mission, of fulfilling a mission, of being able to say in the end of your life, I fulfilled my mission. And it was not just like a random phenomenon that you arrive to the world and you accept responsibilities upon yourself, as Camus and Sartre and many others believe.
Just to add to that, in conclusion, Avraham Isaac Kook in Orot HaKodesh envisions creation as a progressive journey toward divine fulfillment. He sees natural process, including evolution, as part of a cosmic ascent from chaos to spiritual perfection, sort of what you were saying before, mirroring the Torah's narrative of creation, moving from formlessness to order. Evolution becomes a tool, God's unfolding plan. Just to diverge for a second, Rabbi, did you have any experiences? I know you weren't living at the same time as Rav Kook, but is there anything about your life which has a Rav Kook component to it?
Absolutely. I'll
Can
tell you two
me?
stories. Number one, please. When I was in high school, most of my Rebbeim were students of his son, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook. He had only one son, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook. He was the Rosh Yeshiva of Merkaz Arav at the time. And I remember, like, many classes were devoted to the teaching of Rav Kook, which is amazing. Like, Rabbi Kook was, in my opinion, one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century. Knowledgeable in the most progress ideas in the world of the time. And remember that the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century is a time where all these theories were developed, and he was very knowledgeable in all of them. But he gave it a perspective of Torah, which is quite amazing. And in a way, it's what we try to do, right? We try to take the world around us and to see it from a unique lens of Torah. So, it's no wonder that he was really dismissed by the Haredi community, who could not see the integration of these two contradicting worlds. But he's still admired until this very day for his ability to see the modern world not contradicting the Haredi world and the Torah world, and he brings them together in a very insightful, profound way. The big problem is that he wrote in such a poetic way that it's very hard to understand it. You have to really understand Hebrew very, very well in order to understand his words. The second story I want to tell you is, like, when I look at it backwards, it's really interesting. When his son, Rav Kook, used to give a shir every Motzei Shabbat to the close students. Who were the students? Like Rav Chaim Druckmann, Zichrono Livracha, people who are Rashi Yeshivot today, Rabbi Melamed, Rabbi Remer. And one Motzei Shabbat, when I was in Yerushalayim, I wanted to his home. By the way, he lived in the house of his father, very close to Mea Shearim. I think it was Rehov Gedalia, if I'm not mistaken. Tzfania 11, if I'm not mistaken. Very close to Mea Shearim. And before the shir, he came from another room. It was a very modest house. And he was the chief rabbi of Israel, very modest house. And I gave him Shalom Aleichem. I was 15 years old, maybe. And he gave me Shalom Aleichem, and he asked me for my name. So I said, Shlomo Gemara. And he started to laugh. Gemara. And hold my hand like he couldn't believe it. He said, with a name like this, come sit next to me. And I was like, the star of the table. Like, he gave the shir, and I was like next to him. And he tells the students, you know what his name? His name is Gemara. He's Gemara.
That's fantastic.
He was so like impressed by the name.
Rabbi, when you said Rabbi Kook was the perhaps the most elite or the best philosopher, you stopped for a second, then you said the 20th century. And I was wondering, when you said that, is that the same thing as Noach Hoya Tzadik B'Dorotav? Like, could you possibly say Rav Kook was one of the greatest philosophers ever, or would you not say that?
I would say that, because he was very, very unique in all our philosophers, to make all as one. And this is something really great, because many, many times you have to say, like I said in the beginning of this show, you can take evolution, you can take Torah, and you say they don't oppose each other, but you still see them as two different disciplines. By Rav Kook, he really, I think, like Einstein, wanted to find a formula that will explain everything. And in a way, he found it. He found how the history, how maybe even physics in a way, they all work in harmony with the Torah. Not only not that you have to find excuses and explanation and to being apologetic about certain things. No. It's all one. But for this, you have to learn quite a lot. And I don't know any other philosopher before him who did it. Maybe Rashar Hirsch, maybe. But again, and in a way, there are many similarities, I would say. But being like the chief rabbi of Israel, where you start to have like seculars and none, and you have Haredi and not Haredi, and he was Haredi by nature, but at the same time, he completely identified with the revolution that is taking place in Eretz Israel. I don't think that anybody actually is even compared to him.
So let's extend this a little bit further. So you're willing to say that he perhaps is one of the greatest philosophers ever because of the modality or because of the approach that he took to philosophy that no one had taken before or was able to take before. With that, Rabbi, I wonder if you could just comment for a moment, and we can pick up on this in another shiur or podcast. What then is the concept within Judaism of nitkatnu ledorot? Can you define that?
Of what? I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Nitkatnu ledorot.
התקטנו הדורות. Well, we believe that our ability to understand clearly the word of God is diminishing as the generation, the dorot, are going further from the source, which is giving the Torah, from the time of having nevuah, prophecy, that people could receive the messages of God. But we still recognize that maybe we talk about the entire generation. At the same time, in every generation, there are extraordinary people that sometimes can be compared to great people hundreds of years before them. If we take the era of halacha, the Gaon Mivilna is maybe can compete, and I'm not giving here any marks or scores to anybody, but the great scholars of his generation said he belongs actually to the generations 400 and 500 before him, which in Judaism is a remarkable comment because, like, as you say, like, the people 100 years before us, we cannot compare ourselves to them. And to say about the Gaon Mivilna that he was like the Ramban in the 11th century, wow, like this is something.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that Rav Kook, the way I see it, maybe from the time of the Rambam, there was not a philosopher like him. I know that it's a very brazen, maybe too sharp of a comparison, but if I think about the influence of philosophy, of being able to have a huge knowledge of Torah and at the same time huge knowledge of philosophy like the Rambam, you know what? You tell me if you know anybody with the ability to take these two worlds and to bring them together.
So would it be correct to say, with all of that, that today, taking all the greatest Jewish minds in Israel, outside of Israel, the Rav Asher Weisses, the biggest thinkers, would it be then impossible to recreate or to write new tractates within the Talmud? Could we just not do that?
I don't think that there is a need for this. Listen, the Talmud, or what we call Chatimat Talmud, the concealing of the Talmud, mark the point where the knowledge of the laws is given as a whole. You cannot add anything. From this moment on, you can just interpret or to explain or to find the inner logic in things and therefore to apply it in modern day in certain ways. And this is quite normal, in every, especially law system, you have to say, okay, this is the knowledge we have. This is a constitution, so to speak. From now on, we can decide if we want to make amendment, which some denominations in the Jewish community made, or to say, no, this is completely holy, we cannot touch it. We can, in certain times, find some hints that the Torah itself expected it to change in a certain situation. And the most striking example will be the Prose book, for example, that the Torah seems to say that you must give a loan to a person even in a year where you know that it's going to be default, you are not going to get it back. And Hillel HaZaken changed it and made a special document, legal document that bypass this one. But again, he based it on a Torah law. It was not just like his invention who said, okay, the Torah is too outdated, I will come with something new. So this will not come, but I would say the following. There are certain evolution. Think about the Kabbalah, for example. The Kabbalah maybe was known to very few people. And, we just in front of Lag BaOmer, a few days before Lag BaOmer, and Kabbalah today is a well-known spread phenomenon. I'm not learning Kabbalah, but I know many, many people who are learning it and inspired by it. Something that 400 years ago, no one could think about. It was like only for very, very few people. And there is a development, I would say, on the horizontal level. On the vertical one, you cannot really add. You can just develop. And that's what Rav Kook also did. He was not like a person who rewrote the Torah. He just explained it in a way that makes sense in a modern world. In a world that's changing in every aspect, especially in the land of Israel, where Zionism reshaped the Jewish landscape, especially in Eretz Israel, but not only.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, welcome to Parsha and Prose with Rabbi Shlomo Gomorrah and myself, AVRUM ROSENSWEIG. Today we are discussing the Parsha, the Torah portion called Emor, and we are doing that through the lens of classic literature, in this case, The Stranger by Albert Camus. And let me give you an introduction to both of these. The Torah portion Emor, which is Leviticus 21:1 to 24:23, addresses laws governing priests, holiness, sacred times, and of justice. It begins with regulations for the priests, the Kohanim, detailing their conduct, marriage, restrictions, and physical qualification, as they must maintain heightened sanctity in their role as mediators between God and Israel. Rules for sacrificial offerings follow, emphasizing purity and perfection in worship. Emor outlines the Jewish festivals, including Shabbat, Passover, Shavuot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, specifying their rituals, offerings, and spiritual significance, with structures is Israel's relationships with God. It also mandates the daily lighting of the menorah and preparation of the showbread in the tabernacle, symbolizing God's enduring presence. Now, there is a significant narrative in Emor, which we will be discussing, which involves a man born of an Israelite mother and an Egyptian father who blasphemes God's name during a dispute. You'll find this in Leviticus 24:10 to 16. It's very short, not a lot of psukim. The community brings him before Moses, and God decrees that he be stoned to death outside the camp, establishing the penalty for blasphemy. This episode underscores the sanctity of God's name and the severe consequences of violating it, reinforcing communal accountability. The portion concludes with laws of retribution, including an eye for an eye, balancing justice with holiness. Emor emphasizes sanctity, responsibility, and the covenantal bond, calling for reverence in priestly duties, sacred times, and adherence to divine justice. The stranger, l'étranger, how would you say that in French? The stranger, l'étranger?
Don't ask me about the French anything.
Just stick with Hebrew and English.
It's a shame. I'm here in Canada already, almost 30 years, and sorry, cannot speak or understand French.
Fair enough.
Which is a shame, by the way. I would say that, and that's what I tell my students, you have the opportunity to learn French, you should learn French.
I know. My son is fluent in reading, writing, and talking. He went through that stream. Anyways, The Stranger, we'll leave it at that. Written by Albert Camus and published in 1942, is a seminal existential novel exploring themes of absurdity, alienation, and the human condition. It was set in Algeria, French Algeria, and it follows a Meursault, a detached and an apathetic French Algerian clerk whose indifference to societal norms and emotional expectations shapes the narratives. The story begins with Meursault's reaction to his mother's death, marked by emotional detachment, which sets the tone for his character. He navigates life with a passive, almost mechanical approach, engaging in a casual relationship with Marie and befriending Raymond, a morally dubious neighbor. A pivotal moment occurs when Meursault, under the scorching sun, shoots an Arab man on a beach, an act driven by sensory overwhelm rather than clear motive, highlighting the absurdity of human actions. In the second part, Meursault's trial exposes society's discomfort with his lack of a conventional emotion or remorse, his refusal to conform to expected moral narratives, grief for his mother, regret for the killing, leads to his condemnation not just for murder, but for his existential detachment. Sentenced to death, Meursault confronts the absurdity of life and finds a strange peace in accepting the indifferent universe. Why did you bring these two together?
This time it was not as simple as many other times, but I would say two things. This detachment from life reminded me the story of the Mekalel. That's where it started.
The man who
A
cursed.
person who does not belong to the society where he lives in, because the way you spoke about the blasphemy was completely his fault. He cursed the name of God in front of other people, and that's what led to his death. But I think it's a wrong reading of the story, because it started somewhere. And the Torah actually is telling us that he was a Jew, a person that was born to a Jewish mother, to Egyptian father. So the Torah want to tell you this was not the run-of-the-mill Jew. This was a special situation that obviously, as usual, left to our Torah scholars, Chazal, many room for interpretation what happened there. But certainly you must agree with me that the Torah does not describe him as a regular person. If the Torah find it necessary to say that he was a unique person, his father was Egyptian, his mother was Jewish, there is a story behind it. And you can imagine that he was a stranger. He was a stranger. He was a person that no one wanted to be around, a person who was detached. On one hand, I would say, on the formal level, he was part of the Jewish people. His mother was Jewish, but he, like the stranger, inside him, never felt belong. And it's interesting when you spoke about the mother of Idan, and you see the unbelievable attachment between son and mother. I thought that you want to bring it because you want to compare it maybe to the story of the Mekalel, where apparently was even estranged from his mother. She could not help, and he felt like not here, nicht hier, nicht dahin, like they say in Yiddish. So when I read the story of the Mekalel, I always connected it to the story of the Hazar in Hebrew, like the stranger in English, of a person who does not belong anywhere. And the story of how he died is just a result of it. So you have very interesting parallel here. You have a person that has something to do with the mother, as the Torah said. He is executed, exactly like the stranger ends. And this, on the envelope level, I would say, makes the stories very, very similar. But the more I read The Stranger, and I read it a few times because it's considered to be not actually a story. It's more like about philosophy and existentialism, maybe one of the most important books. I connected it also to the story about the Avelut, about what you said about is there holiness in time? Because with no question, Nietzsche and Sartre and Camus, they will have a big problem to accept the concept of Kedusha altogether in their world, in their philosophy. So then I saw the difference between the approach of the Torah to life and the approach of the modern philosophy of existentialism. So I said, well, it's maybe we should talk about it. Although I warned you, this is quite a heavy topic, but we are not afraid of heavy topics. Actually, good literature always deal with heavy topics, but this is a unique one, even in the great literature. And by the way, he did not get the Nobel Prize for this, but he wrote another book to explain the background to the book of the stranger. So this is way more than a book, and in many reading lists, it's considered to be one of the top high 100 books that a person must read in his life.
Rabbi, the Meursault and the Mekalel, where did their distance from humanity, that existential anguish, that loneliness, that emptiness, where does it come from?
Where it comes from, many times it comes, I believe, from the society around us. So although the whole idea of existentialism is the existence of yourself, regardless the people before you, around you, it's your life and only your life. But even a statement like this means that you recognize the power of society around you. In the Torah, society should be part of you. Obviously, you have responsibility to get your decisions by yourself, and in this regard, I would say there is no much difference. The reason why you have to be responsible is different, because the Torah sees, because you are a human being, you are B'Tselem Elokim, so you have certain responsibility, which obviously Camus will not agree with. From him, the authority comes from you, from your inside. But both and opposite opinions will talk about the responsibility to our actions, no questions about it. So, you know, the book of the stranger that opens with a statement of like, my mother passed away yesterday or maybe the day before, which throw you right away into the apathy about life, like the randomity of life. What does it make? What difference does it make if it was on Tuesday or Monday? By us, it's very, very different. For us, like Shabbat is Shabbat, Friday is Friday, and it is very, very important not only to know the day, but the hour that we all know, like in religious, when is Shabbat? When is Shabbat? Because you know that at a certain minute you cannot do certain things that you can do before. By the way, you know, Moshe Feinstein said once for the question, like someone asked him when Shabbat comes. He said, you know, normally in a Jewish home, when the husband asks when Shabbat is, that's apparently after Shabbat was already entered, because we are looking for another moment to complete things that we didn't do before. So in Camus, society had very little importance. In the Torah, huge importance. It doesn't mean that you have to live your life according to other people's expectations, but they are there to support, as we see in the beginning of the Parsha, in the halachot of Aveilut. They are to celebrate together on holidays, and you must make sure that every person in society is happy. It is your responsibility. It's not that every person live his own or her own life. You have to be part of their life too. So there is a huge difference, I believe, between the two approaches.
Let's just extend this discussion a little bit. You know, I was thinking about Yosef. Yosef was thrown in a pit by his brothers, right? You imagine the feeling of being sent away by those whom are supposed to love and protect you. He went to a secular environment, and yet the Torah tells you, the Midrashim tell us, that he maintained his Jewishness. Yes? He
It's
sat, he
amazing
ate.
what you say, because actually, if not certain psukim in the story of Yosef, you could say that this story could be written by these modern philosophers of existentialism. No question about it, because this is a classic. It's such a good example for a person who is completely detached from his
Right.
family.
I want to give another example. Moshe Rabbeinu.
But wait a second. Here is the point. When, for example, the story where he's seduced by the wife of Potiphar, what does he say? V'chatati le'Elohim. Namely, his
Yes.
decisions are made on a moral basis. And that's the difference between the Torah approach and existentialism.
I want to talk about the human response more than the Torah approach, because you're right. Yosef maintained his Jewishness. Moshe Rabbeinu, he left Pharaoh's castle. He killed a man, and then the Jews set about against him. He had to escape for many, many years to privacy, right? Yet, when
By the
approached by
way,
God, there was that.
AVRUM, let me stop you here, because it's very interesting. According to one of the Midrashim, the Egyptian that he killed was the father of the Mekalel. Because,
Oh,
yeah, there is one fascinating midrash that this is the story behind the story. Like the Torah keep the
oh,
privacy. You see, the Torah keep the privacy. Why Moshe was so angry? You know, many people like enslaved the Jewish people, but Moshe understood what happened here. He saw the Egyptian guy raped this woman, and he could not take it, and therefore he killed him. And as a result of this rape, this poor Mekalel was born.
mm,
And, you know, I would say he was killed twice. He was once killed by the way he was born from this Egyptian who raped his mother, and the second time by the Jewish people who could not show the mercy and the consideration with this guy, because our sages are telling us that, he was thrown from the court um, because the law was against him. And this is one of the tragedies of the law. Sometimes you have to pasken, you have to say, and it's against someone. But apparently there was no one just to hug him and to say, you are part of us. Okay, you have a history, you have a terrible history, but you are part of us. Instead, wherever he went, people rejected him. So at the end, he had to curse someone. He cursed God, who put him in such a evil world. And yes, for blasphemy, he had to be killed. But in my heart, I have so much rachmones on this guy. I can imagine how much he suffered through his life, from the beginning to the end.
it's such an interesting thing you're saying. I remember a number of years ago, someone who worked with children who came from impoverished families, well, more so broken families, where the mother was inebriated, the father was not there, and so on. He said that I asked him, I said, how do these children survive in life, and how do some of them grow? How do some of them stay connected to society after going through that? And he said, sometimes there's a person who comes up to them and says a nice word. It makes them feel not invisible. You're a really fine writer. You're a great poet. That piece that you wrote on the Toronto Maple Leafs was brilliant. And they recognize them. And just that alone can carry them. Now, with that, I have a question for you, Rabbi. So you have Yosef and you have Moshe Rabbeinu, who stayed with Amcha in their own way, who stayed with the community, who were lovers of God, and they lived a Torah life. But students who also are in a structured environment, or in a Jewish environment, in your school, let's say, um, yet there's an emptiness, there's a loneliness to them, like Camus' character, like the Mekalel, and they can't seem to find their way back. What I'm asking you, therefore, is why can't they? What happens to that person?
Yeah, they need help from the outside. What happened to them? Something. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist, but something is off. No questions about it. And I think in the modern world, we are going to see more and more people like this. The need today to communicate with the people around you is smaller than it used to be. You don't have even to go to the grocery store and to talk to the cashier. You can order everything online. People in certain places don't have to go to work and to meet other people to talk to. And I do believe that it make an imprint on their personality, because part of us is growing through others. And the loneliness that we see more and more is going to be one of the trademarks of the coming century, unless we will find a way to deal with it.
Okay. The blasphemer's punishment in Emor is swift and communal, reflecting a society's intolerance for violating sacred boundaries. How does Meursault's trial, where he is condemned for his lack of remorse rather than just the murder, mirror the communal judgment of the blasphemer? And what does this suggest about society's fear of existential rebellion?
Here, I would say that also there is a huge similarity. You know, the Mekalel, the blasphemer, is not killed right away. You can hear in the way the Torah describes the story that apparently there was a pause here, like they didn't know how to deal with it. Because I do believe that people were not sure about killing a Jew, and I'm sure that he demoralized many people. Where, like, you execute a Jew, like, it's not a simple thing, and it happens short time after everyone is leaving Mitzrayim, everyone is part of the journey, and nevertheless, sorry about that, nevertheless, you have to kill someone. So I think the Torah, you can hear, if you're sensitive enough, like a pause, what to do with him, like what should happen with him. So what was the problem? The problem was, if I understand it, and for sure that's the motto of the stranger, the rebellion against the society standards. A person sometimes is doing something terrible, and obviously to kill a person is a terrible thing. But the court case was more about, hey, you does not belong to society. You are actually rebel against society, and therefore he was killed. And in a way, I think this is a story also behind the Mekalel. It was like shaking the foundation of society. Here there is a person where the entire society who did not go through his experiences, believe in God, they saw the miracles of God. Here there is a person who doubt it, who say there is no God. The whole society is shaken. And for this, more than any other thing, I believe he was killed. And I think we have to read the story with two eyes. One, his crime, which is a great one, no questions about it. But this particular story becomes so terrible because it reflects a very different thinking from the society around him. And this no society can actually take. And if you read Socrates, for example, why he was killed? For the same reason. The people of Athens saw him as a danger. And if you read the description, I think it's called the apologetic of Socrates, you are going to see that maybe they were not so wrong. Because the person, although we consider him to be a Democrat and the person who raise questions which are so important. But at the end of the day, for them, he corrupted the youngsters of Athens. And people like this sometimes will be doomed to be expelled from society, some by execution, some by excommunication, like Spinoza, for example. So this is a story that goes on and on. You will have these people who will be very different from the society around them, and the only reaction of the society cannot be to tolerate them, but on the contrary, to make sure that they don't continue to shake the boat.
Rabbi, just using this phrase in the context of modern day Israel, society's fear of existential rebellion. How might we see that in Israel today?
I would say that's the core of the issue on both camps. On both camps, because the big question became, what is Israel? What exactly we are standing for? Why we established this country? And the two camps, if there are two camps, although Baruch Hashem, there are many things that still unite us, although I'm very concerned about what will happen in 10, 15 years, who knows, because there is a drift that is getting wider and wider. That's exactly the issue. Like, okay, who are we? And this is existential issue to Medinat Israel. So some people say, no, it's like a Jewish state and democracy is just the way we run life. Some people say, no, it's a democratic state like any other one, and we want some Jewish flavor, but first of all, we are a country like anyone else. And what create the tension, which is very dangerous, by the way, is exactly that. What are we, which is in the core of existentialism.
Rabbi, let's talk about another issue within Parshat Emor, an eye for an eye. The Emor narrative emphasizes retribution as seen in the eye for an eye principle and the blasphemer's death. How does Camus' depiction of Meursault's acceptance of his death sentence reflect an absurdist rejection of retributive justice? And what might this imply about the fairness of divine or societal punishment?
Okay, this sounds like a question for a whole seminar. But I would say the following. Listen, again, your approach to death is very different if you are Albert Camus or you are Moshe Rabbeinu. Because for Moshe Rabbeinu and his followers until this very day, life are sacred because God gave it to you, and God gave it to you for a reason. You have to do something with your life, and death is, the end of your mission. Your mission, not just being here in the world, as Sartre or Camus suggests. And therefore, for him, the person who knows that he's going to die is getting upset with the priest, although the priest, of course, moved him to see the world in a very different way. But death itself is not very different. Like, okay, a person is born, a person died, he made in between some good decision and some bad decision, and that's what life is all about. Very, very different from the way we see life, or at least I see life.
Rabbi, just a question on the literary component of the Torah, and I've asked you this question in other contexts previously. All of a sudden, you have a lot of very formal laws that you find in Parshat Emor. There's a certain formality to the narrative, and then all of a sudden it stops, and this story occurs. And it's 5 or 6 psukim, as we mentioned before. What is that literary tool called within Torah?
It's a big question because you have to remember that Vayikra is named by our scholars Torah Kohanim. It's actually a book of law, the handbook of Kohanim.
Yes.
And you have 2 stories. Both of them are terrible stories. One, the death of the children of Aaron, and the other one is the death of the Mekalel. That's the narratives in the entire book. What does it mean? That's a very interesting question. I never thought about it. Why the Torah put these terrible stories? Both of them are terrible, and both of them are about death in a parsha or in a book of Kohanim that's supposed to be like the happy people who are serving God. That's a very interesting one. Maybe I'll think until our next podcast, what does it mean? Although I can see the connection of like being away from sacred life might end with the end of life themselves. And the story is true in the two extremes. The children of Aaron went out of the laws and the formality of sacred life by bringing Esh Zara. The Mekalel Lehavdil, he expelled himself from the community because he did exactly the opposite. But nevertheless, both of them went out of the borders, of the red lines of sacred life in very two different ways. And maybe that's the message of the Torah. The Torah wants to tell us that Torah Kohanim is about the boundaries of the closeness to God, which you can violate in two ways, coming too close or going too far.
Oh, very good. Very good. By the way, Rashi says about the Mekalel, he's the son of an Israelite woman from the tribe of Dan, blaspheming after dispute over his status. He attempted to pitch his tent in the Danite camp, but was rejected because tribal inheritance followed the father, and his Egyptian father left him without tribal affiliation. That's one explanation of the Mekalel. The Ramban, he emphasizes that the curse's punishment, stoning, applies to both Israelites and strangers, underscoring blasphemy's severity as a universal offense. He argues that cursing God's name rejects the foundation of divine authority, which sustains creation, making it a crime against all humanity, not just Israel.
Yep.
Now, there's a few incredible quotes from the stranger, and I just want to throw a few at you. One of them, which you mentioned already, started the book off, "My mother died today." You know, anyone who writes extensively, especially, the most difficult part of writing a novel or a story is the first line. And this is an extremely gripping line because it really sets you up for the rest of the book. Another quote is, "It occurred to me that anyway, one more Sunday was over, that Mammon was buried now, that I was going back to work, and that really nothing had changed." Really
And
stark.
compare it indeed to the Shiva. Like, you see, he see death and all the ceremonies of death as something very formal. Like, okay, when the person died, there is no meaning to his life anymore. We see it so differently. The whole idea of Shiva and certain ways that we do the funeral. Like, no, it was not just death. It's like an end of a mission.
Yeah.
Today you call it celebration of life. I'm not sure how much I identify with it, but there is something in it because you actually talk about the life, not about the death, because the death is just the end of life. And the Torah view is focused only on life.
Very interesting, by the way, the Kaddish, the mourner's prayer. There's no mention of death there whatsoever. And the beautiful interpretation I heard on that was because the mourner knows what death is. When you lose someone, chas v'chalila, you ensconce yourself in a very, very sad time. The Kaddish doesn't have to remind you about that. What it has to do is remind you of life.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was a beautiful piece.
AVRUM, we will have to do it short. I have to go to another meeting. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. You're a very important person in education. We'll wrap it up with that. If you have 2 seconds, I would like to read a poem from AI, and it will take only a moment. It's by grok.com, so I'm using another artificial intelligence. "Beneath the sun where priests must tread, no corpse to touch, no tears to shed. Emor weaves its sacred thread, holiness a chain of dread. Meursault unmoved would turn away, no gods to bind, no debts to pay. The camp hums, low, with feasts ordained, Shabbat still breath, Sukkot chained. Menorahs glow by law sustained. God's name is every right retained. Yet Meursault with vacant stare sees only dust and sunlit glare." we'll stop there. I want to thank everybody for watching and for listening. We really appreciate your time and being part of this. Please feel free to send us any questions that you might have. Rabbi, any concluding words?
I will have to say goodbye and to run to the other room.
Okay, Zygazin, nice job. We will meet again next week, God willing. Thank you so much.